President Zelensky demanded all Ukraine bomb shelters be kept open around the clock after the death of a Kyiv woman locked out during a Russian raid. Germany and France led a diplomatic push to find a peaceful solution to ethnic tensions in Kosovo at a European summit in Moldova.
The European Parliament cast doubt on whether Hungary's populist government will be able to effectively lead the EU's rotating Council presidency during its term next year.
President Zelensky's first June address addressed the death of a Kyiv woman killed that morning in a Russian air raid, trying to get into a locked bomb shelter. He demanded shelters were kept open around the clock. Across the border in Belgorod, 400 Russian civilians arrived in the city's main shelter after it came under fire in recent days. The president of NATO's newest country, Finland, discussed the war with his Brazilian counterpart, saying a peaceful solution seems remote.
My feeling is that every attempt to reach peace is valuable, but I think that at the moment it is not in sight.
President Zelensky's sights were on bolstering support from allies as he met leaders at the European Political Community Summit in Moldova. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. Russia had its own message of the day. A Defence Ministry video. It said it showed a Ukrainian militant attack on Belgorod being foiled. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron have called on both parties in Kosovo and Serbia to de-escalate ongoing tensions in northern Kosovo by agreeing to hold new municipal elections in Serb-majority towns there. At the end of April, most Serbs in those towns boycotted elections and have since questioned the legitimacy of ethnic Albanians elected as mayors.
Ce que nous avons demandé aux deux parties est très simple. L'organisation dans les meilleurs délais de nouvelles élections dans ces 4 municipalités, engagement de la part du Kosovo, la participation à ces élections de manière claire de la part de la partie serbe, et le règlement prioritaire et sans délai de la question de l'association des municipalités serbes de la part du Kosovo.
The discussions with France and Germany took place on the fringes of the European summit in Moldova, where Serbia's President Alexander Vučić also had bilateral discussions on the Kosovo question with EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell. The diplomatic push coming days after violent clashes between ethnic Serbs and NATO peacekeepers. Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti responded to Western criticism of his country's push to install newly elected mayors by saying that he's protecting democracy. While the diplomatic discussions were taking place, there were signs of ongoing tensions in Kosovo itself. Several hundred people carrying Albanian flags rallied in the divided city of Mitrovica, chanting anti-Serbian slogans. Armenia's Prime Minister and Azerbaijan's President met the EU President Charles Michel, France's Emmanuel Macron and Germany's Olaf Scholz. The meeting in Moldova prompted hopes for a breakthrough in negotiations over the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. An armed conflict there in 2020 left more than 6,000 people dead. The war ended in a Russian-brokered armistice under which Armenia relinquished territories surrounding the region.
In this family photo, it's important to see who is and who's not in it. In total, 47 European leaders, and in the centre, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. This was the second meeting of the European political community that aims to boost the unified response to Russia's war in Ukraine. Moscow was, of course, not invited. More unexpected, though, was the absence of Turkey's President Erdogan, who pulled out at the last minute. Although nothing concrete is coming out of the meeting, it's a great opportunity for rare high-level encounters, like this chat between Zelensky and Serbian President Alexander Vučić, who maintains close ties with Moscow. The main topic of discussion was how to give security guarantees to Ukraine. Zelensky is openly pushing for NATO membership.
Every doubt we show here in Europe is a trench that Russia will definitely try to occupy. whether these doubts are about vital security steps or doubts about our unity, or maybe about our ability to meet the challenges of our time. Every doubt brings more insecurity.
But the path to NATO membership for Ukraine won't be easy, particularly since some members of the military alliance don't support the idea. And also because it's a major red line for the Kremlin and could be a card to play during any eventual peace negotiations.
I think this is important to give Ukrainians hope and also show Russia that we are behind Ukraine and Ukraine's place is in NATO. Of course, everybody understands that this can't happen while the war is going on, but to have a very clear signal that Ukraine belongs to NATO and we are behind Ukraine is important.
The choice of holding the summit in Moldova was also seen as a message to the Kremlin. It was held just 20 kilometers away from the border and also follows the country receiving EU candidate status in June last year at the same time as Ukraine.
Next step is now to try to shape a consensus around what exactly to offer to Ukraine within the next 6 weeks, when NATO leaders will meet in Vilnius, Lithuania. While France made some steps in terms of wording, calling for Ukraine to be granted a clear path to membership, this is not the case for countries like Germany, which is still cautious to provide any concrete timetable. Efi Koutsakosta, Euronews, Moldova.
Finding a way to bring Ukraine closer to the Atlantic Alliance was the focus on Thursday of the informal meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Oslo. In a press conference, the NATO Secretary-General recalled the commitments and actions already undertaken by Kyiv's allies, stressing that it is necessary to create a framework of security guarantees to prevent history from repeating itself.
It's a pleasure for me to gather you here in Oslo.
We don't know when the war ends, but we must ensure that when it does, we have credible arrangements in place to guarantee Ukraine's security in the future and to break Russia's cycle of aggression. If President Putin wins in Ukraine, it will make the world more dangerous. It will send a message that when authoritarian leaders use military force, they get what they want, and that will also make us more vulnerable.
Progress on long-term financing and the security plan for Ukraine is expected to be made at the next NATO summit in Vilnius in July. Stoltenberg hoped that the blockade to Sweden's accession would be overcome by the time of the meeting in Lithuania. Sweden's accession is pending the agreement of Turkey and Hungary.
The European Parliament doubts whether Hungary's populist government will be able to lead the EU's rotating council presidency next year. It says this is because of a major decline in democratic standards and the rule of law. On Thursday, MEPs approved a parliamentary resolution calling on the EU Council to find a proper solution, which could mean preventing Budapest from taking the lead. Hungary has been under intense scrutiny for years now. Last year, Brussels decided to freeze most of its European funds due to corruption risks and what it calls problems with democracy.
We have been saying this autumn in this parliament through a resolution, we have had a huge majority in this parliament to say that Hungary is no more a complete democracy and is an hybrid system between democracy and autocracy. So that's the reason why we are very worried that a presidency should be held in these conditions.
Prime Minister Viktor Orban's cabinet is preparing to take over the rotating presidency in mid-2024 for a period of 6 months. The role includes chairing and planning meetings, but also representing the EU as a whole to the outside world. MEPs believe that Orban's vow to maintain ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin and his appetite for blocking common EU goals make him unfit for the role. They're now urging the Council to stop the Hungarian EU presidency, while the Parliament says it could limit its cooperation during Budapest's term.
Knowing Mr. Orban that he's going to use this for his own purposes to address his own audience, ignore everybody else. And I don't think that the European Union is the campaign team for Mr. Orban. We've allowed him to do that for the last 13 years. So enough is enough.
The Hungarian government rejects criticism from the European Parliament, though, insisting that it will go ahead with its presidency plans.
My favourites. Good morning.
The European Parliament does not respect European values, no democracy, no rule of law. First, they are constantly attacking the free elections of Hungary, and they don't accept the result what the Hungarian citizens, in the name of democracy, chose as a government. Secondly, they don't respect rule of law, because here the European Parliament has no role to play.
The resolution of the European Parliament is non-binding, meaning the EU Council doesn't have to abide by it. So far, it's refused to discuss the issue of the Hungarian presidency.
Jordan has celebrated the marriage of Crown Prince Hussein and Saudi architect Rajwa Al Saf in a ceremony that drew royal guests and VIPs from around the globe. In a reception held in the Jordanian capital, Amman, the couple walked beneath an arch of swords and were welcomed by traditional music and dancing. The list of international royal attendees included the UK's Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, Spanish King Juan Carlos and former Queen Sofia, Dutch King William Alexander and his wife Queen Maxima, as well as the US First Lady Jill Biden and former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. More than 1,700 guests were present at the reception, which featured various authentic Jordanian musical performances. Masses of Jordanians shared the royal family's delight by gathering and dancing in the streets of Amman and waving to the royal couple's motorcade amid a heavy security presence as the kingdom declared Thursday a public holiday.